What is up, everybody? I am the Hot Commodity Ant C, and you are checking out the Uncensored Pro Wrestling Podcast. Today begins a new series for us here at the Uncensored Pro Wrestling Podcast. It is something to wrestle with recap sessions. In these recap sessions, I will be recapping every single Something to Wrestle with podcast episode featuring Bruce Pritchard and Conrad Thompson. Bruce Pritchard is a former WWE producer who still works for WWE. He started back in 1988 and has been around ever since. He got fired, but he is now back. Conrad Thompson is a wrestling fan who is a editor and a writer. He also is married to Ric Flair's daughter. So that means that the Nature Boy is his father-in-law. So throughout these episodes, I will just give you a quick recap over what was discussed. So you don't have to listen yourself. I mean, you could. It's definitely a great series to listen to, but this is just a good little way to break down the most important moments from the series. So episode one starts, and episode one is titled Dusty Rhodes Comes to WWF. For me, growing up, Dusty Rhodes wasn't that huge because I was never really a huge WCW guy. So when I do think of WCW, I'm sorry, of Dusty Rhodes, I tend to think of the polka dots common man gimmick he had in WWE first. And then over time, after watching, different documentaries about Dusty Rhodes, I learned of his great athletic ability and just how much of a character he was in and out of the ring. So I was excited to hear about Dusty's move to WWF. Dusty's been an impact player for WCW and NWA for years. So when he did come to New York and WWF, sure, a lot of things changed. So they start talking, and Bruce claims that before Hulk Hogan, Dusty Rhodes was the biggest guy for Vince McMahon at the time. Dusty worked for Madison Square Garden, and he was a killer in the ring. Vince was a big attraction person. In 1983, Dusty Rhodes was in Florida or Atlanta. He always drew money for Vince while he was working in the territories. Dusty cared to the common man. He appealed to regular people because he was a bit heavier. He wasn't a huge, muscular giant like they were back in the day, but Dusty was still a huge fun guy. At the time when Dusty was leaving WCW, he called Vince McMahon and asked, if they could do business together. And Vince said yes. Dusty was a former booker and promoter for WCW. So, this was a huge thing to have him come to WWE. Dusty thought the gimmick of the comic man was a rib at first. He didn't know, with the idea of him working in different shops and working as a plumber, if it was a joke. But all in all, it wasn't a rib, claiming Bruce Pritchard. Joe Watts came up with the Virgil name for Ted DiBiase's manservant. For those of you who don't know, Dusty Rhodes' real name is Virgil, and people believe that naming the character of Ted DiBiase's manservant Virgil was a rib on Dusty Rhodes. However, Bruce again claims it wasn't. Vince went down to Florida to explain the American Dream gimmick to Dusty Rhodes, and everything was fine after that talk. And they filmed the different vignettes of Dusty working as a plumber and in the pizza shop down in Florida. The rest of the vignettes were filmed in Stamford, Connecticut. To normal fans, people didn't really know Dusty Rhodes. Those were normal WWE fans. However, if you were an avid wrestling fan, you would know him. But if you're just a guy like me who watched WWE, it would be hard to really tell who Dusty Rhodes was. Vince was able to offer Dusty Rhodes opportunity to make more money than he would in WWE with all the different merchandise and distribution sales that WCW did not have at that time. At that point, for Dusty to either be WWF or nothing. Bruce Pritchard talks about filming a vignette with Dusty where he was being a butcher. And at the time, his robe was nice and clean and pristine. So Bruce Pritchard decided to take all the nasty meat blood and smear it all over Dusty Rhodes. And he just remembers having fun doing that. The wrestlers that worked for Dusty Rhodes that were competing in WWE were not that happy with him, and others heard rumors that he was making a lot of money, and they were just feeling slighted towards Dusty. Some of them were. Vince was at a TV taping, and that's when he told them he saw Dusty in big yellow polka dots, which became Dusty's gimmick, wearing the polka dots. And SummerSlam 1989, he fought the Honky Tonk Man. Bruce remembers Honky and Dusty doing a sing-off. Dusty Rhodes thought he really could sing, and Dusty decided to do a rendition of Johnny B. Bad, or Johnny B. Good, but it became Dusty B. Bad. because Dusty couldn't really sing. At house shows, well, for WrestleMania 6, Dusty teams with Sapphire to take on Macho King Randy Savage and Sensational Queen Sherry. The character of Macho King looking down at the common people, that was pretty much the storyline, and Dusty was the king of the common people. At house shows, Bruce had to work with Dusty, Sapphire, Miss Elizabeth, Randy Savage, and Sensational Sherry. They all were in a loop together. He loved it. Dusty dictated a lot of the matches. Pretty much all the wrestlers would run into Dusty's atomic elbow. Pat Patterson was an agent for Canada shows. Pat tells Randy Savage, Brother Love and Elizabeth, that he hated the match in the limo. Patterson claiming that Dusty's abusing you guys, you're bumping for him, and Pat made them come up with a different match. That night, Savage goes to talk to Dusty Rhodes about it, and Savage tells Dusty that Pat didn't like the match. Randy says, Bruce, tell Dusty the new finish. Dusty's listening to this and he's looking, and Dusty says, this is like someone grabbing Babe Ruth and telling him how to play baseball. And Savage says, okay, Babe, this is what we're doing, and he leaves. So they continue to call American Dream Babe after that. Sapphire was used because she was a common looking lady. She was an independent wrestler. American Dream didn't really like having her with him and thought she wasn't very helpful in terms of his gimmick, but otherwise she was used. Dusty told Vince that he was on a diet. He was planning on exercising, but Vince told Dusty not to change. He wanted Dusty the way he was. Vince actually also came up with the term puppies that Jerry Lawler likes to say all the time. The American Dream theme song was made for Dusty Rhodes. Jimmy Hart wrote Dusty Rhodes and the Big Boss Man's theme song. At Survivor Series 1990, Dusty worked with The Undertaker. That match was designed to get The Undertaker over. Dusty then got an opportunity to go to WCW as a booker, and Vince allowed him to leave. At the Royal Rumble 1991, Dusty Rhodes teamed up with his son Dustin Rhodes to take on Ted DiBiase and Virgil. Dusty recommended Dustin to the WWF. And in terms of Dustin Rhodes leaving WWE, Dusty wanted Dustin to come back to WCW with him, so Vince allowed that to happen. Dusty was always pantless in the locker room. That's a fun fact. He never wore his pants. He would always take them off. Bruce and Dusty rode together in a Honda Prelude. It was during Dusty's first WWF run show, and Dusty said that he was the second most recognizable athlete in the world, only second to Muhammad Ali. And he said this over and over and over again. And Bruce Pritchard kept telling Dusty Rhodes, no one would know who you are. He kept saying, he's like, I'm second to Muhammad Ali. And then Bruce gets pulled over by the police, and Bruce has weed in the trunk. American Dream tells a cop that he was going 88 miles per hour, and he asked Bruce Pritchard to slow down. Police then stopped them and asked if they are wrestlers, and the police officer asks Bruce Pritchard if he is Brother Love, and then he goes to Dusty and says, aren't you still in AWA? And then they go on their way, and Bruce says, Dusty Rhodes, second most recognizable athlete in all the world, second only to Brother Love. So that was a fun little thing that Bruce did with Dusty. So that comes to the end of this episode. It was great to hear about Dusty's interactions. I didn't really know that he was pantless a lot backstage, and it's interesting to see how other guys thought of him and learning a bit more about the American Dream, because for me, he was out in the 70s and 80s. He's such a prolific character, but to learn more about him backstage and learn more about him coming to WWE was definitely interesting. You can check out this episode in the Something to Wrestle With archives on Apple Music, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts available. And this is a great episode. I was happy to learn more about American Dream Dusty Rhodes, and I hope that you guys learned a bit more too. Our next episode will be on the Mega Powers. That was a great episode. I'm excited for you guys to hear about that. Before I log off, I want to make sure that you guys are tuning into us on YouTube. If you are, make sure you subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell to stay notified when new content is created. If you're checking us out on a podcast platform, that's great. We are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and wherever you get your podcasts. With that, I'm going to let you guys have a good night. Stay safe and stay uncensored. Until next time.